Good evening, everyone. I am Zandi Sherman, a member of the South African Jews for a Free Palestine, and on behalf of our organization and the Nelson Mandela Foundation, I would like to welcome you to our Shabbat against genocide in honor of South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice. Tonight, we're invited not only to bask in pride, though we absolutely must do that, but also to renew our commitment to continue to struggle alongside the Palestinian people for their full liberation. It's an incredible honor to have you and members of the legal and government teams who represented our country at The Hague, including our distinguished speakers this evening, Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Ronald Lamola, Senior Advocate Dr. Adila Hassima, and Professor Haydar Eid. We're also honored to be joined by Director General of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Zane Dango. To you and all the members of the ICJ team who are with us tonight, I extend our deepest gratitude. It's also incredibly special to have with us Mam Grasha Michelle. Thank you for joining us. In the traditional literature, Shabbat is described as Mayan Olam Haba, a reflection of the world to come. It comes each week and then it passes, a fleeting moment to connect to the more just, kind, and equitable world we know must and will come. In observing the Shabbat rituals with us this evening, we invite you to experience, not just intellectually, but physically and emotionally, that you are part of a large and diverse community of people who are committed to the liberation of Palestine and collective liberation for all. We pause at this moment to be nourished and energized in preparation for the work ahead. South African Jews for a Free Palestine is a collective of Jewish South Africans committed to justice for the Palestinian people and all people. We are grateful to do this work within a large network of groups here in South Africa, including the South African BDS Coalition, and globally as members of the International Collective of Jews for Justice in Palestine. Our commitment to this work is rooted in both our rejection of Zionism and all projects of settler colonialism, but also a deep grappling with the complex relationship that the South African Jewish community has to apartheid in South Africa and Israel. While we proudly celebrate the long history of Jewish social justice organizing, including the many Jews who fought in the anti-apartheid struggle, we also acknowledge the complicity of many Jewish people and mainstream institutions in South African apartheid and in Israeli apartheid now. It is precisely as both Jewish and South African that we refuse to allow the memory of our ancestors, our identities, and our grief to be weaponized in the dispossession and genocide of another people. Never again must always mean never again for anyone. The responsibility to end the occupation of Palestine is a global one, and yet it felt particularly fitting for South Africa to bring the application to the ICJ on behalf of not just the people of Gaza, but all those millions of people across the world who have stood in solidarity with Palestine. There is a long and shared history of struggle and solidarity between the South African and Palestinian peoples. As Nelson Mandela so famously said, we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. In the year 1948, the year of the Nakba, both the Zionist and apartheid regimes solidified existing colonial occupation to formally dispossess and expel the peoples of South Africa and Palestine from their land. These resonances are not only symbolic. The Israeli government was directly complicit in supporting the apartheid regime in South Africa, and Israel and many of its supporters continue to enable imperial projects of extraction and dispossession across our continent and the world. As we sit here this evening, Israel has started bombing Rafah and are on the precipice of beginning a ground offensive there. The small city at the very southern tip of the Gaza Strip is currently home to more than 1 million people, the majority of whom sought shelter there after Israel falsely implied that the South would be spared the ruthless bombing and ground offensives we've seen in the North. As many of you will know, South Africa made an urgent appeal to the ICJ for additional emergency measures to address the intended military offensive in Rafah. But we know that the struggle will not be won in the courts alone. We know that these legal victories are only as powerful as the activism around them. And so we must show the Israeli state that we are watching and that they will be held accountable for these acts of genocide by the courts and by the people. Many thanks to you all for being with us tonight. And as we begin our Shabbat service, which traditionally starts as the sun sets with the lighting of the Shabbat candles, may we all commit to acting together for a free Rafah, a free Gaza, and a free Palestine.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. We bless the source of all existence, who shows us paths to holiness and inspires us to kindle the Shabbat lights. Amen. Next.
This is the justice blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav tzviyanu l'dok tzedek. Blessed is God who shows us paths to holiness and commands us to pursue justice.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת כולם גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת כולם גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת כולם גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת כולם גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת כולם גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת כולם גם יחד.
Disturb us, Adonai, ruffle us from our complacency, make us dissatisfied with the peace of ignorance, the quietude which arises from a shunning of the horror, the defeat, the bitterness, and the poverty, physical and spiritual, of humans. Shock us, Adonai. Deny to use the false Shabbat, which gives us the delusions of satisfaction amid a world of war and hatred. Wake us, O God, and shake us from the sweet and sad poignancies rendered by half-forgotten melodies and rubric prayers of yesteryears.
And I will read, we cannot merely pray. We cannot pray to you, O God, to banish war, For you have filled the world with paths to peace, if only we would take them. We cannot merely pray, root out despair, for the spark of hope already waits within the human heart, for us to fan it to flame. We must not ask of you, O God, to take the task that you have given us. We cannot shirk, we cannot flee away, avoiding obligation forever. Therefore we pray, O God, for wisdom and will, for courage, to do and to become, not only to look on, with helpless yearning, as though we had no strength. Therefore we pray to you. Instead, O God, for wisdom, will, and courage, to pray, to become, instead of merely to wish.
So we move to the next song, Mizmor Shir, a song for the Shabbat. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך, באמונתך בלילות, על העשור בנעבר, על היגיון ולזמר לשמך עליון. ישמחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך רענן. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון.
A prayer to acknowledge the Nakba. La'el shachafetz teshuvah, to the one who desires return. Receive with the fullness of your mercy the hopes and prayers of those who were uprooted, dispossessed, and expelled from their homes during the devastation of the Nakba. Sanctify for tov uvaracha, for goodness and blessing, the memory of those who were killed in Lida, in Haifa, in Baisan, in Deir Yassin, and so many other villages and cities throughout Palestine. Grant chesed v'rachamim, kindness and compassion, upon the memory of the expelled who died from hunger, thirst, and exhaustion along the way. Shelter beneath kanfei hashechinah, the soft wings of your divine presence, those who still live under military occupation, who dwell in refugee camps, those dispersed throughout the world, still dreaming of return. Gather them, me'arba kanfot ha'aretz, from the four corners of the earth, that their right to return to their homes be honored at long last. Let all who dwell in the land live in dignity, equity, and hope, so that they may bequeath to their children a future of justice and peace. V'nomar amen, and let us say amen. Le'el shechafetz teshuvah, to the one who desires repentance. Inspire us to make a full accounting of the wrongdoing that was committed in our name. Help us to face the terrible truth of the Nakba and its ongoing injustice, that we may finally confess our offenses, that we may finally move toward a future of reparation and reconciliation. Le'el malei rachamim, to the one filled with compassion. Show us how to understand the pain that compelled our people to inflict such suffering upon another, dispossessing families from their homes in the vain hope of safety and security for our own. Osei Shalom, Hashalom, maker of peace, guide us all toward a place of healing and wholeness, that the land may be filled with the sounds of joy and gladness, from the river to the sea, speedily in our day. V'nomar amen, and let us say amen.
Before we say the Shema, which we can either stand or remain seating for, just to explain about the term Yisrael. The term Yisrael in some of the prayers refers to the Jewish people, so not to the colonial state of Israel. While some anti-Zionist communities have replaced the word Yisrael in their texts, we leave it in because we reject Zionism's co-option of Judaism. The word Yisrael, or Israel, it comes from the Bible, and it refers to the descendants of Jacob, the grandsons of Abraham. In the story, Jacob wrestles with a stranger who turns out to be an angel of God, and his name is changed to Yisrael, which means the one who wrestles with God. This term is often used in Jewish liturgy to describe the Jewish people, but does not actually have anything to do with the current nation state of Israel or the occupied land of Palestine. These prayers have existed far longer than the state of Israel or the political ideology of Zionism as a colonial project. The Zionist project relies on the conflation of Judaism with Zionism, and co-opting the biblical term Israel was one of the many ways that the Zionist project has done this.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Mi kamocha bo'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot osef eleh, Nora tehilot osef eleh. Malchutecha ra'u banecha, okeyam lifnei Moshe uMiriam, zeli anu ve'amru. Mi kamocha bo'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot osef eleh, Nora tehilot osef eleh.
Our God, help us to dream new paths to freedom so that the next sea opening is not also a drowning, so that our singing is never again their wailing, so that our freedom leaves no one orphaned, childless, gasping for air.
This is called a prayer for Gaza's children. Lord, who is the creator of all children, hear our prayers this accursed day. God, whom we call blessed, turn your face to these, the children of Gaza, that they may know your blessings and your shelter, that they may know light and warmth, where there is now only blackness and smoke and a cold which cuts and clenches the skin. Almighty, who makes exceptions, which we call miracles, make an exception of the children of Gaza. Shield them from us, spare them, heal them, let them stand in safety. Deliver them from the hunger and the horror and fury and grief. Restore to them their stolen childhoods, their birthright, which is the taste of heaven. Allah, whose name we call Elohim, who gives life, who knows the value and the fragility of every life, send these children your angels. Save them, the children of this place, Gaza, the most beautiful, and Gaza, the damned. In this day, when this trepidation and rage and mourning that is called war seizes our hearts and patches them in scars, we call to you, the Lord whose name is peace. Bless these children, and keep them from harm. Turn your face toward them, O Lord. Show them, as if for the first time, light and kindness and overwhelming graciousness. Look up at them, O Lord. Let them see your face, and as if for the first time, grant them peace.
We've now arrived at the Amidah, which is a central component of the Shabbat service, where each member of the congregation silently recites a series of blessings. It is a moment of meditation and reflection. Tonight we ask that you join us as we reflect on the lives of the children who have been killed by Israeli attacks on Gaza. We've printed a small list in our Siddurim. The list represents only a tiny fraction of the total number of children who have lost their lives. But as we pause to consider the scale of the loss, may we also remember, as is traditionally said in Judaism, whoever destroys a single life, it is as if they have destroyed an entire world. We'll say the first line of the Amidah, and then we'll have a moment of silence. We all stand for the Amidah. Adonai sefaitai tiftach ufi agitehilate. Eternal God, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
I'm going to ask you to join in with this one. Something very simple, and you just keep repeating it, and then I'll sing something over it.
Lo yisago elgo tere, lo yamadu od milkama, lo yisago elgo tere, lo yamadu od milkama, lo yisago elgo tere, lo yamadu od milkama. Yisago elgo tere, lo yilmedu od milkama. Lo yisago elgo tere, lo yilmedu od milkama. Lo yisago
Nation shall not take up sword against nation. They shall never again know war. Now, a poem by Yehuda Amishai. Don't stop after beating the swords into plowshares. Don't stop. Go on beating and make musical instruments out of them. Whoever wants to make war again will have to turn them into plowshares first.
יהיו לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי אדוני צורי וגואלי.
Because of us, this morning I learned the English word gauze, finely woven medical cloth, comes from the Arabic word ghaza, Gaza, because Gazans have been skilled weavers for centuries. I wondered then how many of our wounds have been dressed because of them, and how many of theirs have been left open because of us.
This is a prayer for healing.
מי שברך לאבותינו מקור הברכה לאמותינו. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. מי שברך אמותינו מקור הברכה לאבותינו. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Pray not to break my other leg. I pray for reparation and restoration. To the one who demands justice, inspire us to become Redfade Tzedek, pursuers of justice in our lives and in our communities. Give us the strength to resist power, wielded with fear and dread. Fill us with the vision and purpose to build a power yet greater, a power rooted in solidarity, liberation, and love. Grant us the courage to dismantle systems of oppression, and when they are no more, let us dedicate our wealth and resources towards the well-being of all. May we abolish all forms of state violence, that we might make a way for a world free of racism and militarization, a world where no one profits off the misery of others, a world where the bills owed those who have been colonized, enslaved, and dispossessed are finally paid in full. Inspire us with the knowledge that real justice is indeed at hand, that we may realize the world we know is possible right here, right now, in our own day. May our thoughts and our hopes, our words and our deeds guide us towards a future of reparation, of restoration, of justice. Al kol yeshbei tevel, for all who dwell on earth. Amen.
Before we do the Kaddish, I just want to share what's going to happen next. Because there are many of us, we're going to, after the Kaddish, do the Kiddush, which is traditionally a blessing over the wine, but today we're going to be having grape juice. And then we're going to have some challah, which is bread, which we're going to hand out. And traditionally, you break a little bit, you pass it on. And so that we can all keep each other safe and healthy, very soon there's going to be a round of hand sanitizer coming through the crowd. Please pass along, and then pass along the grape juice and pass along the challah, and resist drinking and eating until we've said the prayers, which will be just after the mourner's Kaddish.
Mourner's Kaddish. Yiskadal v'yitkadesh Shemei Rabba, be'alma divrei cherutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol ha'olam, be'agala u'v'zman kariv, v'imeru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba mvorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya, yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalel, shmei de kedusha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, de'amiran be'almai v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol ha'olam, v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam, ve'imeru. Amen.
Okay, I believe the grape juice is going to start coming around now. Because we were lucky to have so many of you join us, we may not have enough grape juice, but we're going to do our best to get as many of you grape juice as possible.
Okay, everyone, we're going to start with the Kiddush, which is the blessing for the wine or grape juice. So if everyone who has a cup of grape juice, if you can raise it, and we'll do the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pori hagafen. And that means, blessed are you, God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. Do they sip? You can now sip your grape juice.
Okay, so the blessing on bread, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, God, ruler of the universe, who creates bread from the earth.
We'll end our Shabbat service with the DG of Durko, Zain Dangor, leading us in the merger poem. We traditionally say this together as a way to close in community.
And then all that has divided us will merge. And then compassion will be wedded to power. And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind. And then both men and women will be gentle. And then both women and men will be strong. And then no person will be subject to another's will. And then all will be rich and free and varied. And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many. And then all shall share equally in the earth's abundance. And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old. And then all will nourish the young. And then all will cherish life's creatures. And then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth. And then everywhere will be called Eden once again. Amen.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom. So we're going to move now into our formal program. Professor Vern Harris, the acting CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, is going to share a welcome from the foundation and open our formal program. Following Prof. Harris's welcome, we'll hear from Dr. Adila Hassima, Minister Ronald Lamola, and Professor Haydar Eid. And this will be followed by a short Q&A and then the promised finger foods.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Nelson Mandela Foundation. I think we're all here because we've heard the call of justice. It's a justice that is about accountability, a justice which is about that long-haul determination to make a just society, and a justice which, in the words of Jacques Derrida, is about a radical hospitality precisely to those we regard as others, as outsiders, as foreigners. Derrida is Jewish, was Jewish. Justice has to be indivisible. Any fight for justice is connected to all struggles for justice. This morning, I hosted a group of Palestinians and was giving them a guided tour in the archives, looking at Madiba's diaries and notebooks. And at one point, a former prisoner, this is a Palestinian who has spent more years in jail than Madiba did. We were looking at a record which had Madiba's prison number 46664. And this Palestinian turned to me and said, you know, my prison number was 6446. Struggles for justice are indivisible. Welcome here this evening. We make a terrible mistake in South Africa when we listen to only one dominant institutional Jewish voice. There are many Jewish voices, and we're hearing those voices this evening. A particular welcome to them, but to all of you who have made time to be with us. Thanks very much.
I'll welcome our speakers to join us up here. Thank you to Prof. Harris for that warm welcome. I'm not going to take too much of your time because I know we're all dying to hear from our esteemed speakers, but I think it's impossible to say how much gratitude we have to these people who led our country in an incredible act of solidarity. I will start by welcoming Dr. Adila Hassima tonight. Senior Advocate Hassima is Senior Counsel at Tulamela Chambers. She represented South Africa at the International Court of Justice, providing an overview of the risk of genocide and the vulnerability to genocidal acts. I'm not giving long bios tonight because our esteemed guests are well known to us, but I'll pass on to you. Thank you, Dr. Hassima.
Shabbat Shalom. Good evening. Honorable Minister Lamola, DG Dango, Mama Michelle, Professor Eid, the kind hosts of this event, the organizers, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and South African Jews for a Free Palestine, and guests. When counsel address a court, and it is a complex case which may be easily misunderstood, they often open with the following. Let me begin by saying what this case is not about. Sometimes that works. Let me begin by saying what my talk to you this evening is not about. First, it's not about the case before the ICJ. I'm sorry to disappoint. But I am bound by my professional ethics not to engage in the merits, demerits, predictions of an ongoing case. It is in any event not the case of the lawyers in the team, but of South Africa. And the representatives of South Africa here present are able and eloquent spokespeople. Second, my comments are not premised on the conflict between Palestine and Israel as centered on religion. This is not about religion. It's about our moral obligations in the face of a conflict that has reached its current horrific proportions. That said, what I would like to express is that it is of special importance to me to speak to you at the venue of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, because when we speak the name of our former leader and president, Nelson Mandela, we assume the posture of a just peace. Shalom. It is important for me that my few remarks this evening are understood as being rooted in a quest for a just and sustainable peace. As Zandi has already alluded to earlier this evening, the words of Madiba from a speech that he made on the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people in 1997, where he famously said, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians, without the resolution of conflicts in East Timor, the Sudan, and other parts of the world." The speech was made a few years after the conclusion of the Oslo Accords, an event which prompted the president to continue in the same speech to say, I quote, "We are proud as humanists that the international consensus on the need for the implementation of the Oslo agreements is finding expression in the efforts of the multitude of Israeli and Palestinian citizens of goodwill who are marching together, campaigning together for an end to prevarication. These soldiers of peace are indeed sending a message to us all that the day is not far off when Palestinian and Jewish children will enjoy the gay abandon of God in a peaceful and prosperous region." End quote. How terribly distressing it would be for Madiba, as it is for us, to witness the nightmare of the latest war in Gaza. There appears to be no hope for an end to the hostilities between Israel and Palestine, at least not for an end that is not coupled with devastation or that permits for a sustainable peace. But we can't find our way through this without hope. For a realistic hope, we need to begin with an honest conversation where several truths are acknowledged, with the aim of accountability and meaningful justice. Here's a first truth. What we have witnessed in Israel on 7 October and are witnessing in Gaza, the profound inhumanity, did not emerge from nowhere. We cannot speak in hushed tones about the Nakba. Meaning catastrophe in Arabic, it was indeed a catastrophic event marked by the forced displacement, dispersal, and dispossession of hundreds and thousands of Palestinians from their homeland. This enduring trauma has left a gaping wound in a collective consciousness of the Palestinian people, who still carry the burden of that displacement and loss to this day, most obviously by wearing the actual or symbolic keys to their former homes around their neck. The persistent refugee status of a vast majority of Palestinians serves as a crude reminder of the unresolved injustices and the failure to address their right to return to their ancestral lands. The daily indignities and violations of basic human rights endured by Palestinians, including restrictions on movement, home demolitions, and arbitrary detention, aggravate their suffering. I saw firsthand what these daily indignities are when I visited the West Bank in 2014. It is untenable. It is a powder keg. In Gaza, the situation was made worse by Israel's blockade. As Avi Shlem puts it in his characteristically blunt tone, quote, "The stated purpose of the blockade was to stop the transfer of weapons and military equipment to Hamas, but it also restricted the flow of food, fuel, and medical supplies to the civilian population. One American senator was outraged to discover that pasta was on the list of proscribed items. The boycott applied not only to imports, but perversely also to some exports from Gaza. Why prevent the export of agricultural products, fish, and other non-lethal goods? It is difficult to avoid the conclusion that the hidden motive was to cripple Gaza's economy and to inflict poverty, misery, and unemployment on its inhabitants. In its non-military aspects, the blockade constituted a form of collective punishment that is clearly proscribed by international law," end quote. So let's be honest. This is not a war amongst equals. These injustices that I describe ever so briefly demand recognition, because that is the only way to secure accountability and a just resolution. There can be no peace without this. But an honest conversation can't end there. Here's a second truth. We cannot and must not extinguish the memory of the Holocaust. An utter dehumanization of the Jewish people with the express aim of extermination. It is estimated that there are about 245,000 survivors of the Holocaust. This is according to a report published in January this year. And those few will very, very soon be no longer. But the memory of the Holocaust will not end with the demise of the remaining survivors. And anti-Semitism did not end after the Holocaust. We should not pretend otherwise. And we, Jews and non-Jews, must remain vigilant. Both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are forms of racism that we all need to counter. We must resist a game of one-upmanship and recognize that we must stand together and fight against both forms of racism. A third truth: unrestrained violence on either side is not a path to peace. As we enjoy and will enjoy our Shabbat dinner this evening, at least 28,340 Palestinians were killed in Gaza, including at least 12,300 children. The scale of death is staggering. Israel, of course, has a right to self-defense, but it does not have a right that work for kelp. No Palestinian life has value, that all Palestinians, children included, are killable on the spot. This is not defensible in international law, and it is not morally defensible. In 2009, after Operation Cast Lead, Schleim said this: "The biblical injunction of an eye for an eye is savage enough, but Israel's insane offensive against Gaza seems to follow the logic of an eye for an eyelash." Is it ironic, sad, shocking that this comment could have been made today, 14 years later? However we analyze it, one thing is clear. The unrestrained violence then did not lead to peace and security now. Instead, 14 years later, the Israeli Defense Minister proclaims, quote, "We are imposing a complete siege on the city of Gaza. There will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly." This kind of rhetoric argues that Israeli life, Jewish life, is only possible by ending Palestinian life. Gallant's view is dangerous. It places Israeli citizens and Jews everywhere at risk. This rhetoric and the actions that follow it must stop. For the people of this region to live together, to coexist, whether as one state or two, the violence must stop, and a discussion must begin on how to live together in the future. Honesty, accountability, and justice is the only path to a just and sustainable peace. As South Africans, we know the possibilities of that path. We also know the pitfalls. A form of honesty that ends with a TRC like ours will not lead to accountability or justice. It will only lead to a resurfacing of legitimate anger for past atrocity. Accountability is essential, and for the process to be effective, the accounting must begin. To conclude, I would like to refer to a recent piece by Amira Hass. She interviewed survivors from Gaza who managed to flee to a safer place. One of them says, "I'm not dead, but in many ways, I don't exist." This is the impact, some say the goal, of the war. A denial of the impact and implications of the current conduct of the Israeli government will not lead to peace. So let's start with an honest conversation, no matter how difficult. And let's start by harnessing our collective humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Dr. Hassim for those moving words and important truths. I'm now going to ask our second speaker, Honorable Minister Lamola, to share some words with us. You will all have seen that Lamola represented our government and opened our case at the International Court of Justice.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Advocate Hassim, Professor Ed, the Director General of International Relations, Mr. Dango, Mama Kraka, the Acting CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Program Director, the entire Nelson Mandela Foundation leadership, the South African Jews for a Free Palestine, and all who are here this evening to attend this service, the Shabbat. I feel honored to be amongst yourself this evening in this secret service of the Shabbat. It's for the first time I find myself in this kind of a gathering, but I really appreciate and really honor the invitation. Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. It's one of the values that not only permeates through the spirit and the text of our constitution, it is also in the DNA of South Africa. Ubuntu is what Madiba taught us, is what he bequeathed to the world. I thank the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the South African Jews for a Free Palestine for this occasion. And the fact that you have welcomed everyone, irrespective of their religion, their political views, their affiliation, sports, and whatever nature or creed. I've also seen Muslims in the crowd and people from other walks of life. It's a sign that a secular state in South Africa is alive, and we can all live in harmony together with each other with love. And this is a type of life we want to bequeath to the world, to the people of Israel and to the people of Palestine, that coexistence is possible. We are such an example. And this evening's gathering demonstrates that it is possible, it can be done. We recognize that the principle of Ubuntu extends beyond our borders and has the potential to shape global discourse on human rights. Ubuntu teaches us that we are interconnected and that our actions have ripple effects on others. It emphasizes the importance of empathy, compassion, respect for the dignity of every individual. In the context of human rights, Ubuntu challenges us to go beyond legal frameworks and institutional mechanisms. It calls for us to self-respect, to look into our consciousness. It calls for a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all human beings and the recognition that our well-being is intertwined with the well-being of others. Ubuntu compels us to address the root cause of inequality, discrimination, and injustice. rather than treating them as mere symptoms. Ubuntu also reminds us of the importance of collective responsibility. It encourages us to work together to build a society that upholds the rights and the dignity of everyone. This means actively challenging the systems, the structures that perpetuate inequality and discrimination, and promoting inclusivity and social justice. In South Africa, the values of Ubuntu has been instrumental in the process of reconciliation and nation building. It has guided our efforts to heal the wounds of the past and to build a society based on equality, justice, and the respect for human rights. Ubuntu has helped us to move beyond the divisions of the past and embrace our shared humanity. Our humanity extends beyond the boundaries of race, ethnicity, gender, or religion. It is the beautiful tapestry of diversity that defines us and makes us strong. However, it is vital that acknowledge that racial inequality still persists in our country, despite our transformative journey towards a democracy that is inclusive. And this journey will continue to work on it. We took an important step inspired by the Holocaust. The never again principle, vowed by our oppressors and also our former President Mandela, echoed this sentiment, declaring that our country will never again be the subject of indignity. We believe that this should never happen to any race anywhere in the world. It will not happen to the Palestinian people. It will also not happen to the Israel people. Our predecessors, including Dullah Omar, endorsed international agreements like the Genocide Convention and the Rome Statutes, reaffirming our commitment to a more compassionate society and a world free of injustice. Consistency in multilateral institutions is crucial. As we advocate for universal human rights, we firmly believed that a nation and individual should be held accountable for their actions, especially where the very essence of humanity is at stake. It is in this regard that we continue to call for the International Court of Justice and the ICC, the International Criminal Court, to hold the individuals responsible for the atrocities in Gaza accountable, themselves as human beings and as individuals. Africa herself is not at peace. The guns, violence, and acts of terror reign supreme in some of our parts of our continent. And South Africa has been instrumental in resolving a significant number of continent's conflicts, either by mediating or by deploying armed forces under the auspices of the United Nations. Our country approached the International Court of Justice with a sought to affirm the values that Nelson Mandela bequeathed to us, that there should be a just solution to the people of Palestine that is equitable to all citizens, that there must be a stop to the genocide, that we must appeal to the international conscience of the international community to call for their friends, to call for their enemies, to stop the genocide that is happening in Gaza. Within the confines of that institution, we have an opportunity to not only to affirm, but also strengthen the humanity's commitment to justice. This can be achieved through all of us, everyone across the globe, infusing and bringing to life the convention, the Genocide Convention, to ensure that it does what it was intended to do, to stop genocide from ever happening in the eyes of everyone. And this is what Nelson Mandela would have expected us to do. South Africa has recently enjoyed a dark period marked by crimes against humanity. The echoes of state-sponsored violence, primarily manifesting as racial injustice, are still reverberating throughout our nation, casting long shadows over our present, and it is against this background that we must continue to fight against injustice anywhere in the world. Nelson Mandela, our cherished founding father, once imparted to us that, and I quote, "Our daily deeds as ordinary South Africans, must produce an actual South African reality that will reinforce humanity in justice, strengthen its confidence in the nobility of the human soul, and sustain all our hopes for a glorious life for all. This inspiring belief shapes our worldview and forms the foundations of our action, a testament to why we are present here today. We advocate for a just and a peaceful solution that guarantees the rights for all between the State of Israel and Palestine. The South African government has recently requested the ICJ to invoke Article 75.1 of the court, which I quote, it says the court may at any time decide to examine proprietio metu, whether circumstances of the case requires the indication of provincial measures which ought to be taken or complied with by any or all of the parties. The current prevailing situation in Gaza, in particular Rafah, calls for the court to act and not to wait for the whole processes of the case to take place. We remain steadfast in the support and in pursuit for a just solution to this enduring conflict in Israel and in Palestine. We believe that with the support of all of you, of the international community, we can all stand in one voice, call for the State of Israel to stop what it is doing. Your presence here is appealing to the collective conscience of the global community to stand up and stop it. It is also appealing to the State of Israel to stop the state-sponsored violence, displacement of innocent life, in particular children and women. I want to thank you again and appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Honourable Minister Lamola for that call to action and clarity on our government's moral stance and responsibility. I'm now going to hand over to Professor Haydar Eid, who is Associate Professor of Post-Colonial and Postmodern Literature at Gaza's Al-Aqsa University in Palestine.
Thank you. Honorable Minister Lamola, Honorable legal team member to The Hague, Dr. Adila Hassima, comrades, sisters, and brothers. My name is Haydar Eid, and I'm from Gaza. But originally, I come from the ethnically cleansed village of Zarnuga. Both of my parents were born in the village of Zarnuga before 1948. In 1948, the Zionist gangs decided to attack more than 460 villages in Palestine and all major cities and towns, including the village of Zarnuga. Both of my parents moved to the Gaza Strip and lived in the Nusayrat refugee camp where I was born. I grew up in the Gaza Strip, and I got my BA degree and my master's degree from Eastern Mediterranean University in Cyprus. After that, I decided to come to South Africa and pursue my studies. And I got my PhD degree from University of Johannesburg. After which I decided to go back to Gaza in order to join my people and fight against Zionism and try with my people to set Palestine free. I've learned lessons while I was in South Africa. I met anti-apartheid activists. I have developed relationships with people who suffered under apartheid. And I decided also to tell our people in Palestine about the struggle of Nelson Mandela, Steve Biko, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and all the fighters for freedom in South Africa. That was an important and a necessary introduction just to give you a context of what has been going in Palestine and about my contribution. In 2006, we were asked by the President of the United States of America, at the time, George Bush, after the destruction of Iraq and spreading the propaganda, the lie of Americans' aim of spreading democracy in the Middle East, we were asked to head to the polling station and vote for our representatives. And when I say we, I mean the Palestinians of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Only 1/3 of the Palestinian people. Refugees living in the diaspora were never asked to vote. Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel were never also asked to join the elections that took place in January 2006. People in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank decided to vote. And when they voted against the Oslo Accords. They voted against the facade of the two-state solution because people believed that the United States of America, apartheid Israel, and reactionary Arab regimes would not allow us to have a sovereign, independent state. And because people voted against the two-state solution, voted against the Oslo Accords, the United States of America and Israel and some Arab regimes decided to impose a deadly medieval siege on Gaza. We were not allowed to buy milk for our children. We were not allowed to buy fuel for our cars. We were not allowed to buy medicine. And this has been going on since then, since 2006. Ilan Pappé, the courageous Israeli historian, called the siege imposed on Gaza incremental genocide. And as if that was not enough, apartheid Israel decided on the 28th of December 2008 to launch a massive attack. I remember I was driving my car at 11:15 and I passed by the central police station of Gaza. 10 minutes after that, I heard a huge explosion. That police station was attacked. And at the same time, all police stations from Rafah to Beit Hanun in the north were also attacked. Within 3 minutes, 270 people were killed. The massacre continued for 18 days. More than 1,200 people, including more than 430 children, were killed at the time. We were naive. We Palestinians are naive because we believed that the international community would act, would do something. When 1,200 civilians get killed within 18 days, no, the international community would not stand idle and watch that massacre. But the international community did absolutely nothing at the time. So we waited, and nothing happened. The same scenario took place in 2012, and I remember very well. I was driving my car from the Khan Yunis campus of Al-Aqsa University, which no longer exists, by the way, because apartheid Israel decided to destroy all academic institutions in the Gaza Strip. So I was driving again my car from Khan Yunis to Gaza, where I live. 1:30, I remember very well. And again, Israel did the same thing. For 1 week, apartheid Israel killed more than 200 civilians. What did the international community do? Absolutely nothing. Again, in 2014, more than 2,400 people were killed within 51 days. And the international community started talking about both sides not resorting to violence. The colonizer and the colonized, the oppressor and the oppressed. Apartheid Israel has one of the strongest armies in the world. What do Palestinians have? Apartheid Israel has more than 450 nuclear heads, has Apache helicopters, have F-16, F-15, F-35s. What do Palestinians have? Nothing. And what did the international community do? Nothing. People are talking about hope. What kind of hope do you expect the victims of this horror still taking place in Gaza? What kind of hope do you expect them to nurture? Then during the March of Return, and I remember I used to go every single Friday. I saw kids getting killed. More than 270 people were killed. All of them were civilians. With my own eye, I witnessed that. And the international community, unfortunately, I mean, especially the colonial West, as Edward Said put it one day, they blamed the victim. We are being blamed for living in Gaza, for existing, for being there. The international community did absolutely nothing, and this paved the way for what is happening right now in Gaza. I spent, together with my family, the first 2 months of the genocide. I have been displaced 4 times with my 2 little kids who spent nights begging me for bread, for food, and I couldn't provide them with food. We in Gaza, I wanted to start by telling you, about my 40 cousins, together with their families and their kids, their grandchildren who were killed. All of them are civilians. All the civilians, or rather, all the people who died that I know are civilians. Women, children. I can tell you the story of Jana Qudayh, 12 years old, from Khan Yunis, who was starved to death, begging her father for a sip of clean water. And her father couldn't provide her with clean water to drink. The situation right now is more than horrific. The first 2 months, my neighborhood, Rimal, was flattened down on the 3rd day of the genocide. We were asked to move to the north, from Rimal to the north, while they were bombarding the north. I spent that night when they asked us to move with my neighbors, together with more than 7 families, more than 40 people, under the bombardment and airstrikes of the most moral army on earth. The following day, when I looked at my neighborhood, it was completely flattened down. We lost our flat, We lost everything. I left the house only with my T-shirt. Only with my T-shirt. Luckily, I fetched my passport. And that's what saved my life. I know that I'm supposed to be dead. And I don't know whether Haidar Eid is addressing you right now, or is it my ghost? The first night I spent in Rafah, and that was my third displacement, apartheid Israel, the most moral army, attacked a house nearby. 14 people were killed. One of the most hated words in Gaza now, and I'm going to say it in Arabic, anqad, rubble. That was my nightmare. That was my family's nightmare. That one day, people will talk about us, about our bodies being found under anqad. Luckily, I have a South African passport. And luckily, the South African government, and I want to say now, thank you. Thank you to the South African government. Thank you to the South African people. And I'm saying this on behalf of all sectors of Palestinian civil society. I'm saying this on behalf of the Palestinian people. And I'm saying this on behalf of the oppressed all over the world. The fact that the international community did absolutely nothing to support the Palestinian people, in fact, hurts us. It really hurts us. But the South African government has decided to say enough is enough. Because these heroes, and I mean it, they are heroes. When they, for us, what they have been saying since the Hague case has been coming to us Palestinians like music to our ears. I have been talking to my family, to my friends in Gaza, and every single time they call me here, they say, please say thank you to South Africa. And now I'm saying this, and I cannot tell you how much we appreciate this true and real act of solidarity with the victims of the genocide taking place right now in Palestine. So what do we want? Since the ICJ ruling until today, Israel has killed more than 2,000 people. Israel doesn't care. Doesn't care about anything. Why doesn't Israel care? Because Israel has the support of the United States of America. Because apartheid Israel has the support of the colonial West. And by the way, some people feel uncomfortable and uneasy when I say apartheid Israel. Amnesty International has labeled Israel as an apartheid Israel. Human Rights Watch, even Israel's mainstream human rights organization, B'Tselem, is saying Israel is an apartheid state. People are still talking about the two-state solution. The two-state solution, and I know some people here disagree with me, is a racist solution par excellence. On what basis are we, the indigenous population, the natives of Palestine, are expected to give this huge compromise, give 78% of Palestine to settler colonists? Why are we expected to do that? Right, one last point. Israel's right to self-defense. I am an activist. I'm one of the co-founders of the BDS movement. I am also one of the co-founders of the One State campaign. I have never believed in the two-state solution because I have never met personally a South African who supported the Bantustan system in South Africa. And this is why I'm not talking here as a politician. I'm talking here as an activist. And I'm saying that the overwhelming majority of the Palestinian people right now understand very well that the two-state solution is a joke. I personally called it in one of my pieces, the opium of the Palestinian people. And therefore, the solution that can bring peace with justice is a solution a la South Africa, a secular democratic state for all inhabitants of Palestine. A secular democratic state for all inhabitants of Palestine, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, and regardless of gender. Thank you so much.
There are no words that would express the depth of condolence I know we all feel for Prof. Eid and the depth of gratitude we feel for your willingness to share with us in what is only an impossible time. And so all I say is we will not look away, and we are in the deepest solidarity with you. We will now have a chance to ask a few questions. We ask you to be very brief. I wouldn't want to stop you, but I will. We're going to take a single round and ask the speakers to take note of those questions addressed to them, and then we'll have a single round of answers before we head inside for some food. We're very lucky to have the Director General of DIRCO, Zane Dango, joining us for the Q&A, able to answer international relations related questions. So those who would like to address questions to any of our speakers, please raise your hand and we'll have some roving mics.
Hi, great appreciation as well to all the speakers. I wanted to know about I know that Council can't speak much about it because it's an ongoing case, but about the additional measures that have been asked for. Are you able to tell us what the likelihood, anything about the likelihood? Are you able to tell us a bit more detail about what those additional measures are? Anything about that would be much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for remarkable, informative, highly passionate evening. Thank you to all the speakers. Wendy Isaac here. I have a quick question for Mr. Dango as the DG. Just from the perspective of engaging other African states in terms of cross-border solidarity, expressions of solidarity in the cases that, I mean, there's the ICJ one matter, the case has already taken place, we're waiting for the merits, but there's the case that's starting, or the hearings on the advisory opinion that are starting on Monday, which have much broader questions, bringing in questions around Jerusalem, all kinds of things. To what extent is South Africa able to engage in a meaningful way other African states to be more useful in this struggle? Thank you.
Okay, great. We had a question over here.
Thank you so much, all of you. Many people have said tonight our struggles are interconnected. As a Jewish South African, I stand here against Zionism. But as a South African white person, I stand here against racism. And I'm hoping some of you can say something about Zionism as a form of racism and about Zionism as a form of white supremacy. Because Zionism is a white supremacist, European colonial, settler colonial project. And that is a struggle we still have to fight all around the world, including here. Thank you.
More questions?
Everyone will say thank you, but I'll just say it again. Also, so my question is for Advocate Adila. Firstly, I'm sure everyone knows this by now, but obviously the fact that your name means justice is something that I think bodes very well for how the case will go in terms of prospects. So Minister Pando spoke a few days ago about, I guess, intimidation that she's received from Zionists. And I was just wondering if the legal team has had any of that, or in general, what has been the reception, personally, to taking on this really important case. Thank you.
I'd just like to extend my thanks as well. My question is for Professor Eid. You spoke about the importance of bringing a one-state solution into the conversation, and I was wondering if there have been any moves in South African government to explicitly support a one-state solution and what that movement looks like.
Thank you so very much. I feel so much love for everyone here. I have such deep love. I just want to say I am the international community. We are the international community. What can I do?
To all the presenters, my question is about the Arab world or the Muslim world, because I don't see them being so vocal against the Zionists. With the region having so much wealth of oil, and Africa having so much wealth of minerals, I believe we can actually impose sanctions against the white supremacy, America and those who are supporting the war. So I want to find out from the panel, why can't we have discussions on that? Because right now the American dollar is becoming stronger, the Israel shekel is stronger, and while there is this genocide or atrocities happening.
I just wanted to thank the South African Jews for Free Palestine for what was, I think, a little bit of a magical evening here in the gardens. I thought it was really incredibly beautiful. But my question's a little harder for the DG. What is the government's stance on South Africans serving the IDF, and what measures are they going to take? Thanks.
A question for the DG. South Africa has taken a strong and courageous stance. How does this play out? We're getting some repercussions from the global north. How does this play out for South Africa? And in a new world with multipolar kind of global forces, what's our protection from BRICS and other forces?
Hi, this is for the DG and for the rest of South African government. We have a fantastic legal system that is supporting what's happening again to the Palestinians. But we don't see that support in any other areas in the government. We don't see it in support in sport. We don't see it in our economy. We don't see it in any other departments. When are we going to actually make a stand in the whole of South Africa, and the South African government can actually lead us in that way? We don't see any movement. We should be boycotting a whole bunch of areas against the US, against Britain, against Israel, and we are not doing that. Can the government please try and answer that? Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with the, and I hope I can answer all the questions that were directed to me, but I'm sure Minister Lamola and others will add in. On the additional measures, and it's a pity that, given the oath that Adila can weigh in, but we've got a fantastic legal team, and when Prime Minister Netanyahu first made mention of his intentions with Rafah, our first port of call was to look at what the Security Council could do, but our legal team decided that just in case the Security Council is, as usual, moribund and does nothing, that we should consider what else we could do. And they had drafted a letter that we kept in our back pocket, and when the Security Council felt, we could see there was no motion in the Security Council, we then decided to put that letter in. And that letter essentially uses the rules of the court, Article 71, and it urges the court to use its own powers and assess the situation, and based on that, decide on new provisional measures that will focus on preventing more deaths in the Gaza, in the Rafah area particularly. Of course, extending it to the whole of Gaza. We left it up to the discretion of the court. We did not want to be too prescriptive in what we wanted them to do, but I think it was quite implicit in our letter that it's about to prevent more irreparable harm, more deaths. And given the fact that normally 280,000 people, and Haidar can speak more eloquently on this, normally live in that part of Gaza, and it's already densely populated. But now with 1.5 million people living there, any armed action is going to give rise to many, many massacres, and that's what we wanted to prevent. The court responded within 2 days of receiving our letter, which was a good sign, and they gave Israel 2 days from their acknowledgement to respond. And we all have seen, or many of us have seen, Israel's response, which was, in the words of one of the lawyers, where I can't mention, contemptuous. But it was contemptuous. We're not sure what the court would say, but essentially I think there's a good sign that they did respond as quickly as they did. Wendy, on your question on engagement with other states, on the advisory opinion matter that's before the court that emerged from the General Assembly to look at the legality of the occupation and apartheid, there's 52 states that will be making oral presentations from Monday onwards. South Africa is one of them. We're presenting on the 20th. I think it's the largest number of states ever presenting on a case like this. And the coordination has been quite extensive. So there's a lot of coordination between capitals, but also in The Hague, between embassies and also between legal teams about how to approach taking this case forward, because it's quite an important one, as you pointed out. So we are engaging with the African states that are involved, but also with other states from Latin America and elsewhere. But 52 states is quite a significant number of states that have intervened in this particular case. On the ICJ case, because we took a contentious route, Article 9, the scope for consultation wasn't that big. We had to keep it quiet, and we could only make it public once we've actually filed the application. But we are engaging with states about how and when they can intervene. And most of them who have indicated they will intervene will wait for the memorial process where South Africa files its memorial, and they will then assess how and when and what angle they will take in the intervention. So there is a lot of engagement with them. I think the Zionism and racism one would be Haidar. I just want to think, what are some of the others? The two states, yeah. So South Africa has historically used the two-state approach because it was the prevailing legal instruments in the international community. So a lot of the resolutions do speak to the need for a two-state solution based on 1967 and the right of return of all the refugees. But as Haidar has pointed out, there is a discussion that we are aware of and that we appreciate, and the fact is that the two-state solution has been imperiled for a number of reasons, not least withstanding the actions of the current Israeli government. Speaking to people that were involved in the Oslo negotiations, they will admit that the two-state solution was never really part of the plans of Oslo anyway. So it's no surprise when Prime Minister Netanyahu says he's not interested in a two-state solution, because it was never really factored into the negotiations. So you would have heard, even when Minister Lamola spoke, he spoke about a just solution for all who live there, and I think it sort of tallies up to what Haidar is saying. Of course, this is a discussion that government will engage with, because we have to engage with the prevailing logic in the UN system. We are, of course, a state working with other states within the United Nations systems, and we will have to engage with what the prevailing logic and resolutions are. So maybe a new resolution that will emerge after some of the deliberations on both ICJ cases will help us to move forward on this politically and legally. The repercussions issue, I think, is also, I don't know if Minister Lamola wants to take that one. Look, we did anticipate that when you take a case like this that pierces 75 years of impunity, that there will be repercussions. Many cases at the ICJ that involve countries of the South where is either border disputes, when they take each other to the ICJ, but very rarely is it about going to the substantive human rights issues that a country of the South takes a country of the North, or in this case, a country associated with the West, to the court for substantive human rights abuses. The Wall case was one of those, but the Wall case didn't deal with the crime of crimes. It didn't deal with genocide in the way that it's being dealt with now. So of course there was going to be pushback, and I think we've all seen some of the verbal pushback that came initially, where spokespeople who perhaps didn't read the application, which stated that it was meritless. And I think when we did send them the application again. But we have also seen there's a bill by two freshman congressmen in the US that is asking for, based on this case in the main, that the US reviews its bilateral relations with South Africa, and calling for a whole range of measures, including sanctions. And we will engage with the US about that, because we do believe that it's going to be odd to try and punish South Africa for doing essentially what is morally and legally right, as Adila pointed out in her own speech. But we do see that many of the states that were essentially quite vitriolic in the initial responses are showing a somewhat different stance now. We see some countries now imposing arms embargoes against Israel. So we've seen Japan. We've seen the statement by Australia and New Zealand and the UK citing the ICJ case as part of the reasons why they're calling for a ceasefire. So there's a bit of both. There's going to be countermeasures against us that we'll have to deal with politically. But we will also see some support, because I think the merits of the case, as most people here have stated tonight, speaks for itself. I think that covers. As Dirka, we had put out a statement just reminding the public and the rest of government that it is actually unlawful to go and fight in the IDF without getting permission from government. There is been no permission given, so all those who are fighting are there unlawfully, and we're working with other arms of the state to ensure that they do investigate and bring them to book. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to go back a little bit to the one versus two-state solution, and I think it's important for people to understand, you know, that there are pragmatic reasons why you cannot have a sovereign independent Palestinian state on 22% of the land of Palestine. That is to say, the 1967 border, the land that Israel occupied in 1967. Since 1967 until now, and especially after the signing of the Oslo Accord, Israel has taken every possible step to make the establishment of a viable Palestinian state impossible. Israel has erected a monstrous wall in the West Bank, the apartheid wall, has expropriated more than 20% of the land of the West Bank and annexed it to the so-called Greater Jerusalem, has besieged the Gaza Strip and transformed it into, I wouldn't call it an open-air prison, I would call it a concentration camp. The Gaza Strip, by the way, is only 1.8% of historic Palestine. Now, the two-state solution, in fact, reduces the Palestinian people to only those who live in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. That means 2/3 of the Palestinian people are left out. Palestinian refugees living in the diaspora and 1.4 million Palestinian citizens, or rather third-class citizens of the State of Israel. In other words, if you even establish a Bantustan and call it the Empire of Palestine, that in fact does not deal with the basic rights of the Palestinian people. Basic rights guaranteed under international law. One, right of return of Palestinian refugees to the towns and cities and villages from which they were ethnically cleansed in 1948. Two, it does not deal with the question of equality to Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel. So therefore, I think we need to start thinking seriously about a new paradigm. A paradigm that takes the rights of all components of the Palestinian people into consideration. That was about the one and two state solution. Of course, we are not expecting the South African government to start defending the one state solution, because it is up to us Palestinians to start dealing with this new paradigm. The second question about Zionism, of course, Zionism is an ideology that denies the very existence of the Palestinian people. In the late 19th century, after the first Zionist conference, two rabbis were sent to Palestine to see whether there are people living in Palestine, and no. And they sent a letter back to Theodor Herzl saying that the bride is beautiful, but she's married to another man. That was never taken into consideration by Zionism as a settler colonial ideology that denies the very existence of the Palestinian people. Ben-Gurion in 1948, he wrote a letter to his son. It is in the National Archive in Israel right now. He said, "The old will die and the young will forget." And that was the justification for the Nakba. 1967, Golda Meir was asked, it is on YouTube, you can find it on YouTube, what about the Palestinian people? He said, it is not as if we have stolen the land of Israel from the Palestinian people. There is no such thing as Palestinian people. In other words, exactly like any settler colonial ideology that is based on the denial of the existence of the indigenous people, Zionism has decided that there is no such thing as Palestinians. The United Nations in 73 or 74, issued a resolution saying that Zionism is a racist ideology. And I think now what is happening is that the world, and when I say the world, now there are two worlds, the official world and you, conscientious people all over the world, understand that our problem in Palestine is exactly like what you had in South Africa, a problem of colonizer and colonized, oppressor and oppressed, an ideology of white supremacy, settler colonialism that refuses to accept our humanity. And I think, we can talk about that more and more. Any other questions that I'm supposed to address? I don't think so. There were 2 questions for me. Yeah? All right? Okay.
And just before I answer the personal question, I must say that it takes immense restraint from me not to talk about the case. I'm very, very tempted to. And I wish I wasn't under bar. The one thing I will say, though, is that the use of the law and the use of courts is a last resort. It's not, well, one, it's a last resort, but 2, it's just a tool. The real change doesn't come about through a court case. Real change comes about from people's power, from soldiers for peace, as Madiba put it. So it's up to us in our individual capacities, and as I've said in my earlier remarks, our collective humanity. So as tempted as I am, I won't say anything further on the case. And on the personal, my name, so my mother keeps also getting this question about, how do they choose my name and all of that, and she keeps telling this story. I'll tell you this personal story. She keeps telling everyone, so I'm number 4. There are 3 older siblings. I'm number 4. And my mother says, well, we almost didn't have a 4th child. The only reason I was born is because my father got a 50 Rand increase in his salary, in his yearly salary. So on the day that he got an increase, he phoned my mother and said, oh, we can have another one now. So that's the story of my coming into being. And so she's better placed to answer why it is that she never really quite answers the question straightforwardly, though. Have there been personal repercussions? The short answer is yes. There's hate, there's a lot. And that's been happening for a while. It continues. Intimidation, I will say no, because I won't be intimidated. So I won't use the word. I won't use the word intimidation. I don't want to put that power into anybody's hands. But does it hurt? Yes, it does hurt when it comes from places and people who are close to you and who you have respect for. But does it intimidate? No. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. What can I do as a member of the international community? I think, firstly, what you are doing this evening is the first step. And wherever you are, in any other platform, whether it's social media or any platform, we all have an obligation to speak for peace, for love, and to condemn the actions of the state of Israel. And this brings me to the issues of repercussions and why the South African government had to do what we have done. In terms of the Genocide Convention, as a signatory, we were obliged to take action. So we had an obligation in terms of the convention to act as a signatory. So any other state that is raising why South Africa and why there must be repercussions, they are doing it for political expediency. They are aware that anyone who's a signatory had an obligation to take this matter further. And that includes the US and many other states across the globe. And even themselves, they are beginning to answer these questions to their own citizens who are beginning to put pressure to say, what are you doing? Because you are aware there's a convention. You cannot continue to support and abet the state, the Zionist state of Israel, to maim innocent kids and children. In Japan and in many parts of the world, they are all facing pressure because the international community's consciousness has been reawakened by the case of South Africa. What was not known and what was hidden prior to the ICJ is now laid bare in the eyes of the international community. They used to watch clips, but they did not understood the magnitude of the operations of the state of Israel. The case has reawakened that consciousness of the international community. It has laid bare. They are now open and they are taking action. And I believe that is the reason why there is a shift now in the narrative in the global community. And I just call for them to continue to do so, and all individuals across the globe to act in unison, because as Adila says, what will now count the most is what each individual says in every corner of the world and what they do. The court indeed does help to put the pressure, to take action, and to assert and reaffirm the international rules-based society. But the voices of the international community, they add more to help that consciousness of the world. It is on the second issue that is also being raised, and I have heard also the Prime Minister of Israel saying that we are abusing the international platforms, including the court and all that. I mean, how can we be accused of such an abuse when the court has affirmed the case from the beginning, that indeed there are plausible acts of genocide? Now, when we go back to the court, we are just saying to the court, it must use its own discretion. We, as Zain has said, we've allowed the court enough space to how it wants to use its discretion. And we're using the rules of the court. How can we be accused of abusing the system when the system is meant exactly to deal with such issues? So these are issues which we continue to clarify to the international community. And we are not abusing that platform because the court in the past, there is precedent to the fact that it has invoked these rules that it has for itself. It has set for itself in the Legrand case, the court has invoked this article. So there is nothing abusive by the South African government in this regard. With regards to the ones that are fighting, indeed, it is a criminal offense for anyone to join forces anywhere in the world in a war situation without permission, and such a person is subject to be prosecuted if they are known in the South African courts. Thank you.
We only came here together this evening because of the incredible work of the South Africa's ICJ team, and it was an incredible honor to have Minister Lamola, Senior Advocate Adila Hassima, and DIRCO DG Zain Ganga with us. We thank the Ministers of Office, in particular Crispin Piri, and at DIRCO Nikki Bowman. Most importantly, it was an honor to have among us a leading Palestinian intellectual. Thank you, Prof. Eid, for sharing his insights, and to him and his family for being with us tonight. We are presenting each of you with artworks, lino cuts which were etched by students and teachers at WITS, connecting the next generation of freedom fighters with those who have spoken and answered questions today. At SAJFP, many people have worked hard this evening. Zandi Sherman, who has been leading us through this evening, and in so many ways, small and big, made this event happen. Our chair, Rina King, who couldn't be with us but enabled this event in many ways. Thank you to Jessica and Keith for the music, to Lily, Ro, Tara, Merlin, David, and so many others for their work towards this evening. And finally, we would like to thank the Nelson Mandela Foundation for partnering with us in this event. It has been incredibly meaningful to work together on this. At NMF, many different people work towards this event, but without Sumaya Hendricks and Samantha Mashapa, none of this would have been possible. We would also like to thank Taylor Johnson and the rest of the communications team, Sepang Mosekua, Etenkosi Singenu, Mandla Nkosi Dakada, Morongwa Fukubaye, Solomon Maklatsi, as well as the IT and facilities team, Ben Magagula, Joe DeTabo, and additional people assisting at the NMF, Norma Ramachloki, and of course, the Foundation Acting CEO, Prof. Vern Harris. Finally, thank you to every person here. We are here to make connections and create solidarity towards liberation. May we work together for a free Palestine.
My name is Iskandar Abbasi. The evening was amazing. I say this as a Palestinian who comes from the diaspora and has been living in South Africa for about 10 years. I came here like one of the guests tonight, Professor Haider Eid, to do my PhD. And I mean, just like Professor Eid, I have been very transformed from my time here in South Africa. And this event tonight was a testament to what South Africa means to Palestinians. To be here with the members of the ICJ legal team felt historic. I was very touched. And there are really no words to describe what it means to us to be in solidarity with each other as peoples who have faced similar struggles, and also as peoples who've been inspired by leaders like Nelson Mandela, who famously said, our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Minister Lamola explained it best when he spoke about this as an expression of Ubuntu. And I believe it was Minister Lamola himself during the ICJ proceedings, who, I'm not sure if he knows this, but when he said the word Nakba, or catastrophe in Arabic, which is what we call what happened to our people with the beginning of apartheid in 1948, he sent a message to all Palestinians that on the surface was saying, we're naming the Nakba, but really what he was saying was, I see you, Saubona. That's the philosophy of Ubuntu for me and what I felt tonight here during this event.
I think it was very important to come through and listen to the panels that came today and to get a really private view of what was happening, to listen in a very intimate session. Everyone is able to ask very difficult and personal questions, which were answered very thoroughly by all the panels. And just to put this out there, hopefully through social media for everyone to listen, through local, what South Africans are really saying and, listening to the South African Jews. And that for me was quite important to come and see the solidarity coming from the Jewish community over here.
From my perspective, I'm not Jewish. I'm not anything, actually. I'm a secular person. But for me, I think it's really important that Jewish people who care about the Palestinian question actually speak up, because otherwise it would appear to the world that the Zionists in Israel are speaking on behalf of all Jews everywhere. And they're not.
An evening like this draws attention to vital issues that the world is facing. Without evenings like this, we cannot create awareness. We cannot raise our voices for injustice. It is vital for us as South Africans, us as a nation, and the world in totality to come together and support Palestine.